I bought a vacation home. My sister tried to steal it by forging documents. Here's what happened next. If you enjoy these crazy stories, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And hey, if you didn't like it, go ahead and hit dislike. I won't hold it against you. Let's get into it. Hey Reddit, growing up, I always knew Jessica was the golden child. She got everything she wanted, while I was left to figure things out on my own. My parents used to say, "She's just a little girl, Ethan. She needs more help than you." That little girl is now 34 years old and still expects the world to hand her everything on a silver platter. What made it worse was that our entire family, my parents and Jessica, had been living comfortably for years thanks to the financial support of my extremely wealthy grandfather. He had always been generous, paying for their homes, cars, and even Jessica's wedding. Meanwhile, I had chosen a different path. I didn't want to rely on handouts, so I worked hard, built my own career, and never asked for a dime from him. I was proud of my independence, even if it meant struggling at times. So when I bought a vacation home a year ago, a cozy lakeside retreat that I worked my butt off for, I knew my family would have something to say. But I never expected what happened next. At first, it was little comments. "Oh, you should let your sister use it. She has kids, you don't. Or, you don't even go there that often. Why let it sit empty?" But I shrugged it off. I was used to their entitlement. What I wasn't prepared for was the betrayal that followed. One day, I got a call from the homeowners association about my renters. I was confused. I never rented the place out. When I asked for details, they told me my property manager, which I didn't have, had listed the home for short-term rentals, and they had paperwork to prove it. Turns out, Jessica and Mike had forged documents claiming I transferred partial ownership to them. They were planning to rent the place out for profit and keep the money. I was furious and immediately called my parents. Their reaction? Not shock, not anger, just excuses. "Mom, oh honey, Jessica wouldn't do something like that. Maybe it was a misunderstanding." "Dad, you should talk to your sister before making accusations. She just wants to take care of the family." I was stunned. They were defending her. Again, it was like nothing had changed since we were kids. Jessica could do no wrong, and I was always the one expected to bend over backward to keep the peace. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. How could they defend her after what she had done? This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a harmless mistake. This was fraud. Jessica and Mike had crossed a line, and my parents were still making excuses for her. It was like I was living in some twisted alternate reality where Jessica could do no wrong, no matter how egregious her actions were. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I needed to think clearly. This wasn't just about the vacation home anymore. It was about setting boundaries, standing up for myself, and finally breaking free from the cycle of favoritism that had defined my relationship with my family for as long as I could remember. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I explained the situation, and she listened carefully, her tone growing more serious as I recounted the details. "This is a clear case of forgery and fraud," she said. "You have every right to press charges. But before we go down that road, I'd recommend sending a cease and desist letter. It's a formal way to demand that they stop their actions immediately and return any documents or property they've taken. If they ignore it, we can escalate." I agreed, and within a few hours, the letter was drafted and sent to Jessica and Mike. It was firm but professional, outlining the legal consequences they could face if they didn't comply. I also contacted the homeowners association to clarify that I was the sole owner of the property and that any rental agreements made by Jessica and Mike were fraudulent. They assured me they would take steps to prevent any further unauthorized use of the property. As I waited for a response, I couldn't help but replay the conversation with my parents in my head. Their dismissive attitude had cut deeper than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just about the vacation home. It was about the years of being overlooked, the constant feeling that my accomplishments didn't matter as much as Jessica's needs. I had worked so hard to build a life for myself, and now it felt like my own family was trying to tear it down. But I wasn't going to let them. I decided it was time to involve someone who had always been fair and supportive, my grandfather. Despite his wealth, he had always valued hard work and integrity, which is why I had such a strong relationship with him. I called him and explained everything: the forged documents, Jessica and Mike's scheme, and my parents' refusal to hold her accountable. I even sent him copies of the forged paperwork and the cease and desist letter. My grandfather was silent for a long moment after I finished speaking. When he finally responded, his voice was calm but firm. "Ethan, I'm disappointed in them. What Jessica did was unacceptable, and your parents' reaction is even more troubling. I've always tried to help the family, but this is beyond the pale. He paused, then added, I think it's time I reevaluate how I've been supporting them. If they can't appreciate what they have and treat you with respect, then they don't deserve my help. A few days later, I got a call from Jessica. Her tone was defensive, but there was a hint of panic underneath. Ethan, I don't know what you're talking about. We were just trying to help. You're never at the house, and we thought it would be a good way to make some extra money for the family. Help? I snapped. You forged documents, Jessica. You tried to steal from me. That's not help. That's a crime. She hesitated, then tried to shift the blame. Well, if you had just talked to us about it, we could have worked something out. You're always so selfish, Ethan. You never think about anyone but yourself. Her words stung, but I refused to let her manipulate me. This isn't about me being selfish. This is about you crossing a line. I'm not going to let you get away with this. The conversation ended with Jessica hanging up on me, but I knew it wasn't over. My parents called later that evening, their voices filled with concern, not for me, but for Jessica. Ethan, you need to think about what this will do to the family, my mom pleaded. Jessica's kids look up to her. If you press charges, it could ruin her life. And what about my life? I shot back. What about the fact that she tried to steal from me? Why is it always about her? My dad chimed in, his tone more stern. Ethan, you're being unreasonable. Family is more important than money. You need to let this go. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were more worried about Jessica's reputation than the fact that she had committed a crime against me. It was the final straw. I'm not letting this go, I said firmly. If you can't see how wrong this is, then maybe I need to take a step back from all of you. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. My mom started to cry, and my dad tried to reason with me, but I was done. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to them, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Over the next few weeks, I focused on protecting my property and my peace of mind. Jessica and Mike ignored the cease and desist letter, so my lawyer and I moved forward with filing a police report. It was a difficult decision, but I knew it was the right one. I couldn't let them get away with what they had done. The legal process was slow and stressful, but eventually, Jessica and Mike were forced to admit their wrongdoing. They returned the forged documents and agreed to pay me a settlement to avoid criminal charges. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it wasn't about the money, it was about holding them accountable. Meanwhile, my grandfather took action on his end. He called a family meeting and laid down the law. I've supported all of you for years, he said, his voice steady but firm. But what Jessica did was unforgivable, and the way you all defended her is just as bad. Effective immediately, I'm cutting off all financial support. If you want to live comfortably, you'll have to earn it yourselves. My parents and Jessica were stunned. They tried to argue, to make excuses, but my grandfather wasn't having it. Ethan has always worked hard and never asked for a thing, he said. He's the one who deserves my respect, not any of you. As for me, I felt a sense of vindication. My grandfather's support meant the world to me, not because of the money, but because he saw me for who I was and valued my integrity. It was a stark contrast to the way my parents and Jessica had treated me. The aftermath of my grandfather's decision to cut off my parents and Jessica was nothing short of chaotic. For years, they had lived comfortably, insulated from the realities of financial responsibility by his generosity. But now, without his support, they were forced to confront the consequences of their actions, and they didn't handle it well. Jessica and Mike were hit the hardest. They had grown accustomed to a lifestyle they couldn't afford on their own. Jessica had never held a steady job, preferring to rely on handouts from my grandfather, and Mike's income as a mid-level manager wasn't enough to cover their mortgage, car payments, and the private school tuition for their 2 kids. Within months, they were drowning in debt. I started hearing stories from mutual acquaintances about their struggles. They had to pull their kids out of private school, and Jessica was forced to take a part-time job at a local boutique, something she complained about endlessly on social media. Mike, meanwhile, was working overtime to make ends meet, but it wasn't enough. They eventually lost their home to foreclosure and had to move into a cramped apartment. Instead of taking responsibility for their situation, Jessica and Mike turned their anger toward me. They blamed me for ruining their lives, and accused me of manipulating my grandfather into cutting them off. They even tried to guilt-trip me into bailing them out. One evening, I got a call from Jessica. Her voice was trembling, but it wasn't with remorse, it was with desperation. "Ethan, you have to help us," she pleaded. "We're about to lose everything. You have the money. You could fix this with one phone call." I was stunned by her audacity. "Jessica, you brought this on yourself," I said firmly. You tried to steal from me, and now you're facing the consequences. I'm not going to bail you out, she exploded. You're so selfish, you've always hated me, and now you're enjoying this, aren't you? You're just like Grandpa, cold and heartless. I hung up the phone, shaking my head in disbelief. It was clear that Jessica hadn't learned anything from this experience. She still saw herself as the victim, and she expected everyone else to clean up her mess. My parents, meanwhile, were also struggling to adjust to their new reality. Without my grandfather's financial support, they were forced to downsize their lifestyle. They sold their expensive cars, canceled their country club membership, and moved into a smaller house. For the first time in their lives, they had to budget and make sacrifices, and they hated it. What surprised me, though, was how quickly they tried to reconnect with me. At first, I thought it might be a genuine attempt to repair our relationship, but it didn't take long for their true motives to become clear. One weekend, my mom called, her tone unusually warm. Ethan, honey, we've been thinking about you a lot. We miss you. Why don't you come over for dinner? We can talk and catch up. I was skeptical but agreed to go, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they had realized how wrong they had been. But as soon as I walked through the door, I knew it was a mistake. The dinner started off awkwardly, with my parents making small talk and avoiding any mention of the recent drama. But as the evening went on, the conversation took a turn. Ethan, my dad began, his tone carefully measured. We know things have been tough lately, but we're family. We need to stick together. Your sister is really struggling, and we think it's time to put this behind us. I raised an eyebrow. Put it behind us? You mean forgive Jessica for trying to steal from me? My mom jumped in, her voice pleading. Ethan, she's your sister. She made a mistake, but she's learned her lesson. We're all suffering because of this. Can't you just talk to Grandpa and ask him to reconsider? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They weren't trying to reconnect with me out of love or remorse. They saw me as their lifeline. They wanted me to fix everything for them, just like they had always expected me to do. No, I said firmly. I'm not going to do that. Jessica needs to take responsibility for her actions, and so do you. I'm not going to clean up this mess for you. The dinner ended in silence, and I left feeling more disillusioned than ever. It was clear that my parents hadn't changed. They were still making excuses for Jessica, still trying to manipulate me into doing what they wanted. As the months went by, it became clear that Jessica and Mike weren't going to let go of their resentment. Instead of learning from their mistakes, they doubled down on their toxic behavior, launching a campaign of harassment and manipulation that tested my patience and resolve. It started with small things, angry texts, passive-aggressive social media posts, and whispered rumors among extended family members. But it quickly escalated. Jessica and Mike began spreading lies about me, claiming that I had set them up, and that the forged documents were part of an elaborate scheme to ruin them. They even tried to turn other family members against me, painting me as the villain in their twisted narrative. The harassment reached a new low when they filed a lawsuit against me, claiming that I had defrauded them and demanding compensation for their financial losses. It was a baseless claim, but it was enough to drag me into a lengthy and expensive legal battle. During the lawsuit, the harassment intensified. I received countless angry calls and messages from Jessica and Mike, accusing me of destroying their lives and demanding that I drop the case. They even showed up at my house uninvited, banging on the door and shouting obscenities until I threatened to call the police. The stress of the lawsuit and the constant harassment took a toll on me, but I refused to back down. I knew that giving in would only embolden them, so I stood my ground and let the legal process play out. Meanwhile, my parents continued to enable Jessica's behavior. They called me repeatedly, begging me to drop the lawsuit and think of the family. They even organized an emergency family meeting, ostensibly to clear the air and resolve the conflict. I agreed to attend, though I had no illusions about what to expect. The meeting was held at my parents' house, and almost every member of the extended family was there. As soon as I walked in, I could feel the tension in the room. The meeting started with my dad giving a long, emotional speech about the importance of family and forgiveness. "We're all hurting," he said, his voice cracking. "But we need to come together and put this behind us. Ethan, we're asking you to drop the lawsuit and give Jessica another chance." I looked around the room, seeing the expectant faces of my relatives. It was clear that my parents had been working behind the scenes to rally support for Jessica. But I wasn't going to let them manipulate me. "I'm not dropping the lawsuit," I said firmly. "Jessica and Mike committed fraud, and they need to face the consequences. I'm not going to let them get away with this." The room erupted into chaos. Jessica started crying, accusing me of being heartless, while Mike shouted insults at me. My parents tried to calm everyone down, but it was clear that they were on Jessica's side. "Ethan, you're being unreasonable," my mom said, her voice trembling. "Jessica is your sister. How can you do this to her? How can I do this to her?" I repeated, incredulous. "She's the one who tried to steal from me. She's the one who's been harassing me and spreading lies. And you're still defending her." The meeting ended in a stalemate, with everyone taking sides and the family more divided than ever. I left feeling exhausted and disillusioned, but also more determined than ever to stand up for myself. The days following the family meeting were a whirlwind of emotions. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from relatives, some supportive, others accusatory. It was as if the family had split into two camps: those who saw Jessica for who she truly was and those who still clung to the illusion of her perfection. One message stood out. It was from my cousin, Sarah. "How could you do this to Jessica? She's your sister. Family is supposed to stick together, no matter what." I sighed, typing out a response. "Sarah, Jessica committed fraud. She tried to steal from me. This isn't about family, it's about accountability." Before I could hit send, another message popped up, this time from my Aunt Linda. It was a private message, unlike Sarah's public post on the family group chat. "Ethan, I've always known Jessica was spoiled, but I never thought she'd go this far. I'm so sorry you're going through this. If you need anything, let me know." Her words were a small comfort, but they didn't erase the sting of Sarah's accusation. It was clear that the family was divided, and I was at the center of the storm. Jessica and Mike, now cut off from my grandfather's financial support, were spiraling. Their once comfortable lifestyle was crumbling, and they were desperate to regain control. Instead of taking responsibility for their actions, they doubled down on their toxic behavior. It started with whispers. I began hearing rumors from mutual acquaintances that Jessica was telling people I had abandoned her in her time of need. She claimed I was mentally unstable and had cut her off out of jealousy. The lies grew more outrageous with each retelling. One day, I received a call from a family friend who had always been close to my parents. "Ethan, I heard you've been struggling with, well, some mental health issues. Is everything okay?" I was stunned. "What are you talking about?" "Jessica said you've been acting erratically and that you've been lashing out at the family. She's really worried about you." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my anger in check. "That's not true. Jessica's the one who committed fraud. She's trying to turn people against me because I held her accountable." The friend hesitated. "I just thought you should know what's being said." The lies weren't enough for Jessica and Mike. They decided to take things a step further by filing another lawsuit against me, this time claiming emotional distress and defamation. The lawsuit was baseless, but it was enough to drag me back into court. My lawyer was furious. "This is a blatant attempt to intimidate you," she said. "They have no evidence, but they're hoping you'll back down to avoid the hassle." I shook my head. "I'm not backing down. Let's fight this." The harassment didn't stop at lies and lawsuits. One evening, I came home to find my car vandalized. The words, "selfish jerk," were spray painted across the driver's side door in bright red letters. My stomach churned as I surveyed the damage. I checked my security cameras and saw footage of Mike sneaking onto my property in the middle of the night, spray can in hand. I saved the footage and sent it to my lawyer. "This is getting out of hand," she said. "We need to file a restraining order and press charges for vandalism." I agreed, but part of me wondered if it would even make a difference. Jessica and Mike seemed determined to make my life a living hell, no matter the cost. I had tried to take the high road, but it was clear that Jessica and Mike weren't going to stop unless I fought back. I decided it was time to expose their actions publicly. I gathered all the evidence, the forged documents, the cease and desist letter, the legal settlement, and the security footage of Mike vandalizing my car, and prepared to share my side of the story. I posted a detailed account of what had happened on social media, tagging Jessica and Mike so they couldn't ignore it. The post included screenshots of the forged documents, the legal settlement, and the security footage. I ended it with a simple message: this isn't about revenge. It's about holding people accountable for their actions. The response was immediate. The post went viral, with friends, family, and even strangers weighing in. Some people were shocked, others outraged. A few still defended Jessica, but the overwhelming majority sided with me. Jessica and Mike tried to fight back, posting their own version of events, but their lies were quickly debunked. The evidence was too damning. Within days, they were publicly shamed, losing what little support they had left. Amid the chaos, I received a call from my grandfather. His voice was calm but firm. "Ethan, I saw your post. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I've made my decision, and I won't let them manipulate me anymore." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Thank you, Grandpa. That means a lot." He sighed. "I've always tried to help the family, but this is beyond the pale. Jessica needs to learn that actions have consequences, and your parents need to stop enabling her." His words were a balm to my soul. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone truly understood what I was going through. The lawsuit Jessica and Mike filed against me went to court, but it was a short-lived battle. Their claims of emotional distress and defamation fell apart under scrutiny. The judge dismissed the case and ordered them to pay my legal fees. As we left the courtroom, Jessica glared at me, her eyes filled with venom. "This isn't over, Ethan." I met her gaze without flinching. "It is for me. I'm done playing your games." Mike tried to say something, but I turned and walked away. I had nothing left to say to them. They eventually filed for bankruptcy and lost custody of their kids, who were sent to live with Mike's parents. Jessica called me one last time, her voice trembling with desperation. "Ethan, please, I've lost everything. Can't you just forgive me?" I took a deep breath, my resolve firm. "You made your choices, Jessica. Now you have to live with them." I hung up the phone, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. It was over. Finally, it was over. Update: Hey everyone, it's been a while since I last posted, and a lot has happened in the past 2 years. I've had some time to reflect, heal, and move on from the chaos that was my family drama. I figured I'd give you all an update since so many of you were supportive and invested in my story. Here's where things stand now. Life has been peaceful. Honestly, I didn't realize how much weight I was carrying until I finally cut ties with the toxic parts of my family. Selling the vacation home was one of the best decisions I ever made. I used the money to invest in a small business, a cozy little bookstore in my town. It's been a dream of mine for years, and now it's a reality. I've met some amazing people through it, and it's become a safe space for me and my community. I've also been seeing someone. Her name is Claire, and she's been a huge source of support and joy in my life. She's the kind of person who makes you believe in good things again. We've been together for about a year now, and it's been refreshing to be with someone who values honesty and respect. She knows about my family drama, but she's never once made me feel like I'm defined by it. My relationship with my grandfather has only grown stronger. He's been my rock through all of this. We meet for lunch every Sunday, and he's always full of wisdom and encouragement. He's even started volunteering at my bookstore, helping me organize events for kids. It's been amazing to see him thrive outside of the toxic family dynamic. Jessica and Mike, well, let's just say karma caught up with them in a big way. After losing custody of their kids, who are now living with Mike's parents, their lives completely fell apart. Jessica lost her part-time job when her employer found out about the fraud scandal, and Mike's overtime hours weren't enough to keep them afloat. They filed for bankruptcy about a year ago and had to move into a tiny apartment in a rough part of town. Jessica tried to reach out to me a few times, begging for forgiveness and financial help. I stayed firm. I told her, "You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." The last I heard, she and Mike were separated. Mike moved back in with his parents to be closer to the kids, and Jessica is living with a friend, working odd jobs to make ends meet. It's sad, but I can't say I feel sorry for her. She had every opportunity to take responsibility for her actions, but she chose to double down on lies and manipulation instead. My parents, well, they're a mixed bag. After my grandfather cut them off financially, they struggled to adjust to their new reality. They sold their big house and moved into a smaller one, and my dad had to come out of retirement to take on a part-time job. My mom, who's always been a stay-at-home parent, started working as a receptionist at a local clinic. They've tried to reconnect with me a few times, but it's always felt hollow. Like they're more interested in getting back in my grandfather's good graces than actually repairing our relationship. The last time we spoke, my mom said, "Ethan, we're family. Don't you think it's time to let bygones be bygones?" I told her, "Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. Until you can acknowledge that, there's nothing to talk about." They haven't reached out since. I do feel for Jessica's kids. They're innocent in all of this, and it's heartbreaking that they've had to suffer because of their parents' poor choices. I've stayed in touch with Mike's parents, who are now raising the kids. They're good people, and the kids seem to be doing well under their care. I've even sent a few care packages their way, books, toys, things like that. I don't want them to grow up thinking I'm the villain in this story. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that you can't control how other people treat you, but you can control how you respond. Standing up for myself was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most liberating. I've built a life that's mine, one that's filled with people who respect and care about me. Jessica may have been the golden child, but I've learned that being the forgotten one isn't so bad. In fact, it's given me the freedom to create my own path, one that's not defined by anyone else's expectations. Thanks again to everyone who supported me along the way. Your kind words and advice meant more than you know. If anyone out there is going through something similar, just know that it does get better. Sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do. If you thought that was crazy, hit that like button and subscribe for more wild stories. And if you didn't quite enjoy it, feel free to hit the dislike. Your feedback means a lot. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think, or share your own experiences. And don't forget to check out my other videos for more insane tales. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.